Sometimes all you need to balance out a little bit of tragedy is some comedy, which is why we are making this video today. Because when I saw this radio hit pop up on my timeline, I was absolutely befuddled. I was flabbergasted, and I wanted to go out there and put this on the internet because the idea that is tossed out here with 100% seriousness, by the way, is just one of the dumbest things that I personally have ever heard. No disrespect to the folks on the radio show that said this. Of course, you know, we're all media people in this world, so we have to, you know, pay our bills somehow. But with takes like these, oh boy, you're opening the doors to a world of online criticism, because if you go over to the BPM Sports Twitter page, you'll find a quote from yesterday where the folks on the show talk about Montreal Canadiens prospect Lane Hutson. This is the video. It will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and read it. But if you translate the text in the post from French into English, it goes out there and says this. The Snake thinks that if the Canadiens want to maximize the value of Lane Hutson, the young defender should be traded as quickly as possible. And if you look at the video, I mean, it's a 17-second clip. They go out there and talk about how, hey, I think Lane Hutson, they should capitalize on his value right now. He's got to be at the most value he'll ever be at. Trade him right away. Get as much as you can for this guy, etc., etc., etc. And the replies, I mean, there's 71 replies to 31 retweets and 29 likes. So everybody is just replying here. Habs Takes Exposed went out there and had the office gif of the guy writing the guy's name in the notebook. And yeah, that kind of encapsulates the entire feeling here. Good Lord, take the mic away. There are a bunch of replies in French. Somebody actually goes out there and says, oh, he's 100% right. A reply asks how. Lane Hutson is currently valued as a potential 80-point defenseman on any trade market. Be realistic, do you genuinely think he'll reach that plateau? I doubt it, but hopefully I'm wrong. And with this Twitter video making the rounds, you had the Habitant go out there and tweet this. We 100% have the worst media amongst all sports teams in any professional sports league. And this tweet has even more responses, which we're going to get into as the video goes on, but I wanted to talk about that main idea. Mostly because when it comes to Lane Hutson, everybody's been talking about him lately because he did make himself known as a finalist for the Hobey Baker Award. If you go over to his point production, he had 44 points in 33 games played. It's pretty similar to his 48 points in 39 games played last year, although it is a tad better. If you just do the math, it's a little bit more polished up this year. He also outproduced his World Junior number from last season as well. So Lane Hutson, for all intents and purposes, is still doing as well as he's been doing in the NCAA. And what exactly should that be evaluated at? Because right now, Lane Hutson is a top-of-the-line NCAA defender. He is one of the best point producers on the blue line in this league at only 20 years old right now, and there should be some sort of consideration for what his future could look like in the National Hockey League or the American Hockey League, whichever one, you know, you want to place him in first. And I get it, long term you could debate that there are questions that could exist as to how well Hutson is going to be able to translate to the National Hockey League. We'd been talking all this talk last year about how, oh, he's outproducing all these guys, Cam York, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, Adam Fox, Noah Hanifin, Werenski, like, name your pick. Lane Hutson has been better than all of them. The only guy he went out there and pretty much matched was Brian Leetch, who is a Hall of Fame defender. Leetch scored 100 points in an NHL season, so is that type of profile guaranteed for Hutson? Probably not. Nothing is ever guaranteed in this business, but if Lane Hutson is being evaluated in the eyes of some of these fans as, oh yeah, he could be an 80-point defenseman, then the idea of trading him away because you're not guaranteed a return on whatever investment that Lane Hutson is at the NHL level, at the very least, it's a little rational. Like, there's a thought process behind it that I don't think is the stupidest thing in the world. However, just considering where the Montreal Canadiens are, what their values happen to be with this organization, and what they've emphasized is their goals, I don't think it aligns at all with the philosophy of trading Hutson away. Like, I get it. If Lane Hutson was a Boston Bruins prospect, if he was a I don't know, a Winnipeg Jets prospect, or a Dallas Stars or an Avalanche prospect. Lane Hutson would have been dangled out as pure trade bait. If Hutson was a Vegas Golden Knights prospect, that guy would have been traded last year. A lot of these teams are in positions where they are sacrificing whatever assets they have for the future because they want to do well now. If Hutson was a Tampa Bay prospect, you think they'd hold on to him? They wouldn't want to go out there and capitalize on Kucherov and everybody else and try to get one more Stanley Cup run? No. If it's Montreal, though, this is a team that has no reason to try to do something like that. You dangle Lane Hutson at the trade deadline or the draft for what? A young player in the NHL who's already established but who probably didn't have any sort of a similar progression like Lane Hutson did? Like, if you're trading Lane Hutson away for some other Doc or a Newhook kind of guy, that doesn't really work, because Doc and Newhook, those situations worked out because the assets that were traded for them weren't really working out either. Romanov was traded away, you got picks tossed away for Newhook, and these assets you could debate. They didn't really have any sort of a path. Romanov was in a system where there's so many extra defenseman prospects that it would have been tough for him to crack the team. For Newhook and trading away draft picks, hey, there's no emotional attachment to draft picks. Draft picks are whatever. They're draft picks. They're not anything. There's no substance behind that until they're used. But for Lane Hutson, this is literally one of the top guys the NCAA has seen from a point production standpoint on defense in decades. So, yeah, I get it. His value is going to be high. No question about that. But what trade return are you going to get for Lane Hutson that actually feels sufficient enough to make the deal? What trade return exists where it's like, oh yeah, I can understand why the Montreal Canadiens, a rebuilding team that could have used a prospect like Hutson, made this trade, while also getting equal value for that? There's nothing that exists in that capacity. Nothing. Nothing that any other team would be interested in trading away. And if you go over to the Habitant and the Twitter reply that we just looked at, oh, we have the worst sports media in the NHL, there are some replies that go out there and say stuff like, oh, you should be open to the possibility that his evaluation of Hutson is a reasonable one. Like it or not, this scout has been right way more times than he's been wrong, especially when we were all convinced he was out to lunch in some of our favorite prospects. Remember Mattias Norlinder? Lane Hutson's trade value is not as high as he's portraying it to be. Not like the issues he thinks Lane has, other teams see that too. No one will overpay a considerable amount for that many question marks. This is pretty clearly a situation where it's likely best just to bank on development and hope he reaches his ceiling. Because the asset you get in return for Lane likely will not move the needle as much anyways, and Norlinder isn't even in the same stratosphere as Lane. Another reply goes out there and says that the idea that Lane's skating and size combo could end up preventing him from being the player that we imagine him to be is real. I think he will succeed, but it's not as sure a thing as some people might think. It's a hot take, but we don't know if it's a bad take yet. The argument here that the Habitant says is that Lane doesn't have much trade value. Honestly, I disagree. I do think that because he has been so dominant, because all the records kept on coming out, and because he's a Montreal prospect, there's so much conversation about this guy that would not have existed if he didn't, belong to the Habs. If he was a Dallas Stars prospect or a Predators prospect, nobody would be talking about Hutson as much as he's been talked about the past year and a bit, because he's a Montreal guy. And like it or not, these kinds of conversations can fuel the perception on how good a player is, and will be. So I actually would tend to disagree with this. I think that there would be a lot of value in trading Lane Hutson. It's just, I don't see the trade actually making sense for Montreal at all. So the fact that we're even having a Lane Hutson trade conversation is kind of bollocks, but at the same time, it is so wild and crazy enough where it's like, yeah, I can understand the perspective here, especially if one is not all too hyped up on what Lane Hutson will be able to offer. Like, if you don't really think that there's much of a chance for him to really be what he can be, like, let's say the majority of Canadiens fans think that Hutson is a 50% chance of being a 40-point player in the NHL minimum. That's another 50% that's like, yeah, no, I don't really see it. I don't really think he's going to be able to do that. And if you think that his value right now, oh, people are talking about him, Hobey Baker winner, he outscored all these other defensemen, like he's so good, There is an argument to be made that acknowledges where other teams could see that, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's really worth talking about. I don't really think that this is going to happen, and I don't think there's a trade out there that exists that would make sense for the Montreal Canadiens. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your opinions about the idea of trading Lane Hutson away? Links are going to be in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to the video, but I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.